Good morning and welcome to Warriors Corner. Our next presentation is Strategic Thinkers and Project-Based Education with presenter Brigadier General Shane Reeves, Dean of Academics, and 4 super awesome cadets.
All right, so good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shane Reeves. I am the Dean of the Academic Board at the United States Military Academy, and we are truly honored to be here to present at Warriors Corner. I do have to tell you that typically this time of year, I'm in the classroom, and so this is a little bit strange for me to be in a conference versus a classroom. And things are a bit inverse. They're flipped. In a classroom, typically those that are sitting in front are the unfortunate few who came to class late. Today, this is like prime real estate right here. Like, this is the good spot right here. It's like 3- and 4-star territory. In a classroom, typically those in the back are the deliberate thinkers who've thought through where they're going to be. No, Mr. Farnan, actually, you just got caught in the back path right there. You got stuck, right? And all of you on the sides, I know what your normal deal is. You're like, I'm in the wrong class. I'm going to drop this immediately afterwards. So it's a great time at West Point in the fall. We were very busy with classes and everything, so I was really excited when my XO said, hey, Shane, your favorite conference is coming. I was like, that's great. So I did my normal. They're my favorite conference. I packed up my bag. I went upstairs. I unpacked my luggage. I put on my full Chewbacca outfit, and I wandered down the escalator and said, I'm ready for Comic-Con. And he was like, no, actually, this is your other favorite conference. This is AUSA. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that's my favorite. That's right. But there's been a lot of awesome things about AUSA already. I see old classmates. I see friends. It's been neat to see a lot of the emerging technology. And of course, the most impactful and important thing is all of the swag. I was wandering out to get some coffee yesterday, and as I was walking down the street, I saw a major walking, and he had his hat on, his beret was kind of disheveled, and his arms were legitimately full of stuff. He had like t-shirts, cups, bumper stickers, pins, and lanyards, lots of lanyards. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I just got so much stuff. And I thought, he's a genius. He's got like birthdays, wedding anniversaries, Christmas covered for like 4 or 5 years with all the swag back here. But I would say for us, we think of this as a little bit more of the Warrior Scholar Corner. And the reason why, as you'd expect, West Point develops cadets in a certain way. We want them to be physically tough. We want them to be mentally resilient. We want them to be disciplined. We want them to be professional. But we also expect them to be able to have an intellectual foundation that allows them to successfully navigate the complexities, the uncertainties, and the ambiguities of the modern and future battle space. And we do that through a broad liberal arts education, a core curriculum that ranges across the science, technology, engineering, and math, humanities, and social sciences, to give them that intellectual foundation, but also recognize that they need to be lifelong learners. And as lifelong learners, they need to be able to satisfy their intellectual curiosity, and that intellectual curiosity is satisfied when they get to dig deep into a particular discipline. And that also inspires them, because we're not looking just to have tactical intellectual officers, but operational and strategic. And so we do this oftentimes with the intent fully to have critical thinking young officers that have embraced their professional identity as officers, but also have the ability to apply their intellectual ability to solve many of the Army's most complicated and difficult problems. So I think you could probably say that this is playing out in real time as we watch in Ukraine what is happening. We know that when the Russians went into Ukraine, continued the invasion that started in 2014 because they started in Crimea, that they hit a roadblock, they hit obstacles, and those obstacles were simply Ukrainian resistance. And when they hit that roadblock, their junior officers froze. And when they froze, they didn't know what to do. And so they had to start calling senior commanders forward to try to regain momentum, to great cost to those senior commanders. And simply all that happened was the fog of war that's inevitable had crept across the battle space, and in creeping across the battle space, they weren't capable of thinking their way out of the problem. We completely expect that to happen. We expect our junior officers to be able to think their way out of a problem. We expect them to be able to embrace the ambiguity and grayness that is the fog of war, and in doing so, that's our great advantage. Because we recognize that we may not have an economic advantage or a demographic advantage in the next conflict, but we will have the ability to outthink our opponents. And we're going to be able to outthink them because of a rigorous and robust academic program that is developing them so that they are the intellectual scholar, or the scholar warrior that is necessary to fight and win on the modern battle space. Now, in doing that, we don't intellectually coddle cadets. They are challenged, they are pushed. In the classroom, and they're expected to have their assumptions challenged, and they're going to be able to, at the end of the day, be critical thinkers that are sophisticated enough to be able to work their way through any problem, and that really is our great advantage as a military. Now, complementing all of this to make these strategic thinking junior and then later senior officers is project-based learning. And project-based learning also can also be called experiential learning. But that project-based learning that lets them take their academic background at the academy, apply it to a particular problem, and in that application, they gain inspiration for future service, but they also help solve many of the Army's most difficult and complicated problems, and that's the power of the West Point academic program. The power of the West Point academic program is its breadth of disciplines. It is not singular focused on a particular technical question, it's interdisciplinary. So you don't simply think about solving artificial intelligence through a technical perspective. You think about there's ethical questions and historical questions and legal questions and all the rest. And so what you're going to hear is 3 great examples today of cadets that are working on really significant project-based projects that are based on their academic expertise they've gained in the classroom at West Point. And in those projects, what you're going to find is that West Point is increasingly solving many of the Army's most complicated problems while simultaneously inspiring these cadets to future service. So let me introduce you to Mackenzie and Ashley. And they're going to talk to you about high-energy lasers and application in space. And again, what I would highlight about this project is don't think of it as a single myopic project, but look at how it's interdisciplinary, because these 2 cadets come from different disciplinary backgrounds, yet together they come together to create a solution that is broad-based and comprehensive. So I'll turn it over to you, Mackenzie.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie Arns. I'm a space science major at West Point, and really what we're considering is commercial satellite imagery. We use this imagery to detect enemy terrain, force movements, and capabilities, and without this we lose the ability to inform ground movements. And so a lot of satellites are built with defense mechanisms to protect them from the natural irradiance of the sun, and high-energy lasers are able to produce these same effects on satellites. And as our adversaries continue to build their technologies, we want to know what laser parameters they would use on our satellites so that we can better protect them in the future. One really great part of this project is I've had the honor of working with General Karbler, who is the commander of Space and Missile Defense Command, and he's actually attended one of the in-progress reviews of the project and was able to show us how he's been thinking of this exact same problem. And it's given me the ability to see that the projects that we're working on at West Point aren't just in addition to our academic program, but it's giving us the ability to see problems that people in the Army are addressing currently right now. The other great part of this project is I've gotten to work with Ashley Clegg, who is a law major, and she has worked on what the legal implications are. And so it's made me think not just about are we able to do these things, but should we do them? And if we should do them, do they maybe change how we develop that technology? And so I'm going to hand it off to Ashley so she can talk about her part.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Clegg. I'm a law major and senior here at West Point. My part of this multidisciplinary project is the law of lasers in space. With that, I bring a different perspective, a new approach. I'm not so concerned with the physics about it because Mackenzie here is working on the physics that go along with high-energy lasers in space. I'm more so concerned with, does that constitute an armed attack? Can I use a high-energy laser on a satellite? Is that permissible? Is it permissible if it is a commercial satellite? Additionally, understanding the physics components such as the level of effects that come from the different levels of energies that occur, does that cause different legal implications? All of these are crucial questions that it's important to understand before we employ these weapons in space, especially with the ambiguity that comes along with space law and international law currently. With that, we've been able to build a foundation with this project. We started working with high-energy lasers on Army Strikers, which are currently working on putting them in a platoon now. However, we use that in understanding, is it permissible to use a high-energy laser against a helicopter on an Army Striker? Moving forward, I completed the Space Army Basic Cadre course, which provided that space foundation for me that was crucial for understanding how this can be used in space interactions. Moving forward, we were very grateful to have the opportunity to talk with General Karbler. He provided the intent of the Army and a better understanding of why we're doing this project. It provided the overall bigger picture for us and understanding why it's important. Lastly, this benefited my development as a future officer because it's helped me understand both sides of the conversation. I've been very fortunate to go to a physics conference and have to understand that I can fully immerse myself in something I'm not comfortable with and bring something to the table while also taking what they have away from me. Thank you.
So thanks, Mackenzie. Thanks, Ashley. So what you hear is with partnership with Space and Missile Defense Command, coupled with their interdisciplinary approach, they're really solving some of the Army's biggest problems, but that's just the ancillary benefit. But what you're really doing is inspiring them to future service, and also satisfying their intellectual curiosity, which will also create lifelong learners in our officer corps. So let me introduce Josiah, who's going to talk to us about hypersonic missiles. And again, this is in partnership with DevCom, another one of our great partners at the Academy. Go ahead, Josiah.
My name is Cadet Josiah Gibson, and I'm a senior mechanical engineer, currently working on my project of the hypersonic rocket team. What happens when soldiers on the ground can no longer communicate through normal radio means? The mission becomes that much more difficult. Now, imagine being able to spontaneously place a communications relay into low Earth orbit, bypassing the enemy's means of radio jamming. This is the ultimate goal of the hypersonic rocket team. I've had the opportunity to work on the hypersonic rocket team capstone as my senior year culminating project to demonstrate my knowledge in an area in which I'm extremely passionate. The rocket team has iterated 2 designs over the past 2 years, bringing the rocket between the boundary of Earth's atmosphere and space multiple times. This year, I aim to optimize propulsion elements within the rocket in order to advance the design without the need for additional propellant. This year, the team has also traveled down to Redstone Arsenal to work alongside DevCom's Aviation and Missile Center. Together, aided by the brightest minds in the industry, we have begun iterating several designs to bring spontaneous satellite deployment to life. I specifically remember one night with my partner. We came back after a day at DevCom's headquarters, and we were really struggling with an optimization problem for the nozzle of the rocket. We sat down, opened an advanced rocket propulsion textbook, and the solution just didn't exist. It was a unique solution, a unique problem that nobody has ever experienced. We went the next day to work with the nozzle expert, and we ended up coming with a brand new and unique solution, which is really satisfying and rewarding. This taught me 2 main things about the Army. First, you don't need to have the answer to everything, and 2, you just need to know where to look. The Army provides a lot of resources and opportunities, and I'll use that as a future officer and a second lieutenant as I lead the next generation of soldier.
Thanks, Josiah. And then finally, I'm going to introduce you to Greg, who is working with our great partners at Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installation, Energy, and the Environment, working on the electrification of vehicles. And as you can probably hear, the theme, this is all connected directly to the Secretary of the Army's priorities, and it's very much nested in all the bigger Army's objectives. So go ahead, Greg.
Hello, I'm Cadet Gregory Langoni. I'm a senior civil engineering student working on my capstone design project, electrifying the modern battlefield. Leading up to the project, I was given an outstanding opportunity to go work for Mr. Farnan at the Assistant Secretary of the Army Office for Installations, Energy, and Environment in the Pentagon. And in my very first week there, Mr. Farnan introduced me to Mr. Richard Kidd, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Environment and Energy Resilience. Now, Mr. Kidd shared a story with me that shaped my perspective on sustainability in the Army. He explained that when the Abrams tank was being designed, there was a proposal to give it an auxiliary power unit, which would allow the tank to burn less fuel when it's stationary because it'd be powered by the APU rather than running the main turbine. But the APU was generally scrapped from the design and in favor of other design metrics like top speed. When the tank eventually went to war, there were times when half of its fuel could be burned when it was standing still, and then subsequently, guarding the fuel lines to sustain these vehicles was a leading cause of soldier deaths. Hearing the story made me realize that sustainability, resilience, mission capabilities are not always complementary, but that I should look for the win-win scenarios and carefully consider the trade-offs. And so now I'm taking this framework to my project where we're working on 2 objectives. The first is to help electrify all Army non-tactical vehicles by 2035. And our team is looking to assess what energy infrastructure we'll need on our installations to accommodate the charging of heavy-duty vehicles like trucks and buses. And then the second is to understand what technology advances will be necessary to electrify tactical vehicles with massive energy demand like tanks. And so at the end of the project, we hope to brief Mr. Farnan and help his team achieve the objectives that they've laid out in the Army Climate Strategy. As for my education, I'm learning to take big projects and break them into small, actionable pieces. And for that, I'm very grateful to the Academy and to all of our partners for the opportunity to work on it. Thank you.
So before I open up to questions, let me just summarize a few things for you. Number one is this is just a small indicia of the intellectual capital that's being developed and fostered at West Point. And really what you start to see is that the intellectual capital at West Point is being leveraged by the Army and really nested in all that you see around you to help these young leaders become innovative and creative and entrepreneurial. That's what's going to make the difference in the next or the current or future wars. Number two is I would tell you that if you ever have a question, this is a bit of editorializing. If you ever have a concern about the future of the United States, you just need to come see cadets for a few minutes, and you're going to feel fine about the future of the United States. Because if you just saw what I just saw in this very loud conference space, and they're able to do this and perform like they did, it just demonstrates the excellence of the entire Corps of Cadets. And finally, I would end with a story. This project-based learning, or experiential learning, as we sometimes call it, is extraordinarily important to complementing the academic base that they receive at the Academy. And so there was a cadet named John that I taught, and he was not getting it. He was not receiving the he was not into it. He was not excited about his academic classes. He was not interested in what I was saying, and it was clearly not because I was a bad teacher. That could not possibly be possible, right? And I was sitting there, and I'm like, I am frustrated by this guy, and I don't know what to do to get him excited. And I had a captain come and say, hey, sir, I think what we need to do is let John apply his entire academic program in a real-world situation, and let's see him start to rely on it and understand the importance of it. So I said, all right. So we picked to send him with a small group of cadets and a faculty member to study war crimes in Europe. And so he went to Srebrenica, and in Srebrenica, he had an opportunity to see at that time the largest genocide in Europe since World War II. Went over to Nuremberg and looked at where the prosecutions following World War II took place, the Nuremberg trials and the subsequent proceedings. Went over to Auschwitz, went through a death camp, and ended up at The Hague. And at The Hague, while he was there happened to be a prosecution taking place, and the prosecution was one of Slobodan Milosevic's henchmen who had been responsible or partially responsible for what happened at Srebrenica. And on the stand was a Belgian lieutenant, a much older man now, who had been part of the NATO task force, who had been given the opportunity and the obligation to protect the Bosnians, and he didn't. And so this was during sentencing, during aggravation, and the lieutenant was talking, and he had great remorse. He had great remorse. He was very upset, and he said, you know, I had my moment. I had my golden moment when I should have done something, and I didn't. I didn't realize it was my golden moment. And so when John came back and we talked and he back briefed us and we were having this discussion, I could hear him relying on his ethics and philosophy background. I could hear him talking about history and international relations and American politics even, and of course law, but he also started to talk about needing evidence to objectively find someone guilty and relying on the scientific method. And I saw at that moment the power of the academic program, but also the importance of what we do at West Point isn't just to provide the intellectual foundation or to inspire them to future service, but to help prepare them for their golden moment when it comes. And it's going to come. And so I will open up to questions. So on behalf of General Gillen, the superintendent, and General Mark Quander, the commandant, we're excited to be here at AUSA. And so with that, any questions for the cadets or myself, we're willing to take. And thank you. Someone ask about the nozzle. Someone ask about the nozzle. Come on. Sir. Come on up here, guys. Come on. Go.
Yeah, Sidney Freeburg, Breaking Defense. Is there a path to operationalizing any of this? I mean, obviously, the Army's labs and educational institutions are full of people having great ideas, but there's that valley of death to put them into practice, whether it's a hardware solution or somewhere else across .mil-PF.
This is the beauty of West Point, sir, which is West Point is at the it's perfectly placed. It's a perfect venue for academia and practice to come together, so that oftentimes, sometimes when you have academics, they get too theoretical, they're a little bit detached on the research, and sometimes operators are constantly trying to knock down the 25-meter target or whatever's happening that day. But West Point brings together both those communities and breaks down what oftentimes are not intentional silos, but they run in parallel. But when you bring the academics together with the practitioners, what you find is you get creative solutions that are actually practical in application. But to give you an example, sitting right next to you is General Carveler, who is at Space and Missile Defense Command, and he is working very well with our two cadets. And I'll let you talk to this gentleman about how we're going to operationalize what you're talking about with high-energy lasers.
So really what we're working on right now is using our own laser facilities to figure out what kind of parameters we need in order to produce effects on a satellite. And so at the end of the project, the plan is to have those parameters laid out along with the law piece from Ashley, and then we're going to send it up to our department head, and he's going to send it up to General Carveler. So in terms of how we're operationalizing, we're doing the work at West Point, so that way we can give it over to the operational Army.
Did I answer your question, sir? Not a satellite.
No, sir. The laser clearinghouse would not like that.
We're not shooting satellites, but we are actually shooting some lasers. So that's quite interesting. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Rachel Jacobson, Assistant Secretary, Army Installations, Energy and Environment.
Yes, ma'am.
So thanks in particular to Greg for your great work on our behalf. Thank you all for these great presentations. So you're all seniors and you are all deeply immersed in these incredibly interesting projects that have such application for the future readiness of the Army. What if you want to pursue your interests at a graduate level, but you're also ready to start training? How does that work with your careers?
Do you want to answer?
So cadets at West Point have multiple opportunities to continue their education. And this can be through formal education at other civilian universities or simply through experience out in the force. So there are some cadets each year that go out and pursue graduate education immediately after. And as you all know, there are plenty of Army officers that will continue formal education later in their career. And the other component of education that's critical, and I know that you're working on, is trying to educate officers that are out in the force. And we should be receptive to that as well.
And ma'am, just to supplement, so we have what's called the rotating military. So the faculty are a blend of civilian professors. 28% are civilian, 72% are military. Of that 72%, 53% are rotating military. So we bring in about 100 to 120 rotating military each year, and they're young officers that have gone to some of the best graduate schools, come back to West Point to teach. They get to continue to do the research and dig deeper onto the topics that they've been working on, as well as start to think a little bit differently about being operational and strategic. And then they'll go back out into the force and plug in. So for example, at Space and Missile Defense Command, most of the functional area 40s, which are Army space operators, will come through our physics and nuclear engineering department and then go back out into the force. Yes, ma'am. Other questions, please. Sir.
Yeah, good morning, Colonel Cervera from French Land Forces. Just one question. How do you link up all your work here with AFC work?
So we have approximately 50 DoD and DA partners across. It's between 120 and 130 capstone projects, like you'll see with cadets. We also have staff and faculty working on specific projects. But if I had to go more specific with Futures Command, we're connected to all 6 of the 2028 priorities. We're working on the 2035 modernization efforts. All of our entire academic program, which is based on 13 academic departments from all the different disciplines, are all very, very connected. So, example, our systems engineering department is working directly on multiple AFC modernization efforts, both in terms of implementing the technology, but also we start to think again through some of the intangibles. So our law department is thinking through some of the law of armed conflict questions that come through the implementation of some of the emerging new methods of warfare. Does that answer it, sir? But West Point is really increasingly as the superintendent says, the big capital of intellectual capital for the Army. It's a think tank that is plugged in on so many ways where you can leverage this type of excellence to solve some real focused, difficult Army problems.
So in practical terms, it means that the cadets can be embedded within AFC teams to work on a specific topic?
So in practical terms, the cadets would continue to be at West Point studying. Faculty members would be the conduit to AFC to work on those particular problems, and they would bring the problem set back for the cadets to work on. Others, please. We have like 4 minutes. Don't want to waste it. We'll not let you out of class early. It's not happening. So I'm a professor. I'm extremely comfortable with uncomfortable silences. I just walk around and kick the ground. Oh, there we go, ma'am. Here we go. Oh, we want me to do a Socratic method. I like it. You, what do you think? Sir, please.
Sorry, I have to animate the debate. You spoke about satellites, laser technologies. Isn't it a concern for the Air Force?
Sure, go ahead.
I don't know specifically. We haven't worked with the Air Force on this project. I know that the Air Force is currently branching a lot of people into the Space Force, so I know that this is a problem that I'm sure they are considering as well, as they have similar priorities that we do.
And so the synchronization would take place at General Karbler and General Dickinson's level, but the Air Force is doing research on this also, and we're great partners, whether it's with Air Force Research Labs or the Air Force Academy, where they're doing a lot of this same work or similar work, and so we try to synchronize those efforts so it's not redundant. So we would like to thank all of you for taking the time for being with us. We truly appreciate it. If you have any questions about anything I've talked about, I'll be available, as will the cadets. I also, I'd take a moment if I were you and come up and talk to some of our cadets that are scattered throughout. It's a lot of fun to talk to cadets. So thank you all again, and thanks for having us at Warriors Corner.